On va enchaîner sur effectivement la prochaine présentation pour ne pas perdre plus de temps et manger en temps en heure. Voilà, je laisse la parole à ma collègue pour l'introduction.
Oui. Donc, je vais pas représenter Martha parce que Nathalie vous a présenté, mais en tant que legal officer au sein de service commun de soutien juridique, elle va maintenant vous présenter les règles du jeu. Donc, comment gérer votre subvention.
Merci. Bon, je vais faire ma présentation en anglais, désolée pour ça. Mais c'est une question d'accuracy, de précision pour la terminologie légale que je ne peux pas traduire. Et je suis pas en une position de traduire en français le MGA, qui c'est un document légal. Alors, désolée pour ça, mais bon, je vais continuer en anglais jusqu'à présent. So, in the next 35 minutes, I will provide a presentation, an overview of what we call the rules of the game. We call it like that in the presentation for ISO in Europe, meaning that the goal of this presentation will be to go a bit through the model grant agreement or the grant agreement that you signed with the Commission. And we are not going to. I'm not going to focus on all the rules in the MGA because it's huge, but on the main articles that create a bit more of misunderstandings between us and the beneficiaries. And that could be of a bigger help for you. I'm sorry in advance because it's going to be a bit of a technical, more boring presentation than before. And I will focus on the practical areas that actually lead for most common errors, which we don't consider is with intention, but that could lead you to issues or complications during the project implementation. So basically, I'm going to talk about the following points. First of all, I'm going to explain the legal setup, meaning on what is based the MGA, the model grant agreement. Then what is a grant agreement? Per se, the types of participants that can actually be in the action, the type of cost, the reporting, and finally the non-financial obligations, which is a part that is most often disregarded when implementing a project and is very much important, but because of the complexity of the financial part, is sometimes forgotten as obligations and rights that you have. So first of all, the legal setup. Basically, we have three main regulations that create all the legal framework on which we then develop the grant agreement. First of all, we have the Horizon Europe regulation that actually is setting the objectives of the Horizon Europe program, the rules for participation, and it takes the same duration as the implementation period of the multi-annual financial framework, which is 7 years, and we are about to conclude for this Horizon Europe program. Then we have the financial regulation, which is actually setting the financial rules, standard supervisory practices for the grants and also procurement, and sets out all the principles of managing of EU budget, including for us the protection of the EU interest. And also very important to take into account, as per the response that I was providing before, the general annexes and the Horizon Europe main work program, which is taking place every 2 years, and is actually where you can find the general legally binding conditions when you are submitting a proposal, and that need to be maintained on the entire duration of the action. Basically, when you are implementing your project and also designing the proposal, you need to take not only look at the core conditions, topic conditions, but take very much into account the general annexes and what is explained there for the evaluation of our procedures and the general conditions. So all these three legal documents are downstream into the model grant agreement, which is reflecting all those complexities into one single document. And what is the model grant agreement? So basically, it's a contractual document that we sign with you, meaning between the granting authority or the Commission, most of the time the granting authority, and the beneficiaries. Why it is important is legally binding for both parties. Basically, it sets up also all your rights that you have during the pre-implementation and also all your obligations. And among the most important ones, you have, into your rights to receive the EU funding in accordance to the implementation of your project and the terms and conditions that you have in the grant agreement. The ownership of the results, which is very important for us because you own everything that is produced during your action. And as we were mentioning before, to ask for amendments when needed to adjust to the practicalities that you may have during the pre-implementation. And throughout your obligations, you have the most important non-financial obligations, which is the proper implementation of the project, meaning that you need to implement the project as you have described in Annex 1 during the proposal stage, to submit reports on time and continuous monitoring, and to display the EU emblem and reference of Horizon Europe as the visibility rules in the grant agreement. It's very important to retain that you have a maximum grant amount set up in your grant agreement that you sign with us, on which even if you spend more money than you are actually signing with us, you are not going to get more than this maximum ceiling that we are agreeing upon the signature of the MGA. So we want to go throughout the structure of the MGA. First of all, the data sheet, which is a novelty that we have in Horizon Europe. For us, we find that is quite useful because it's like a summary of everything, all the conditions that you have during the implementation of your project, and which are the rules that apply specifically to your grant. Then the grant agreement is divided in several chapters, which you have. We are going to focus in a bit more on grant implementation and financial provisions, but you also have very important articles, which is the consequences of non-compliance that you may have when you are not actually following or completing your action in line with the grant agreement. Then, which is very important also to keep in mind, is not only the body of the grant agreement, it's also that you have several annexes that are actually included, are also legally binded in your grant agreement. First of all, you have the description of the action, which will be what you have been building up during your proposal stage. The estimated budget that you have also designed and has been awarded and evaluated. The accession for small beneficiaries, which is more bureaucratic, the model from the financial statement, which in some cases, I will go through it a bit later, depending on the threshold that you have for the maximum grant amount, you will need to be subject of submitting a certificate of financial statements. And then Annex 5, which I also will go in a more detailed manner, which are specific rules that apply in certain cases, but not in all of them. And it's very important to keep an eye on your datasheet because it will let you know if any of these specific rules of Annex 5 apply to your grant agreement. So participants in the action, as you know, in Horizon Europe, you have many ways to participate into a project. Basically, the most important one is the beneficiaries, who are the signature. They sign the project and have all the rights and obligations downstream in the grant agreement. Then you have the figure of an affiliated entity, which has similar conditions in grants and rights and obligations as the beneficiaries, with the difference that they don't sign the grant agreement and they need to have a legal or capital link with the beneficiary. You have third parties providing contributions. In Horizon Europe, it's very important to keep into mind that we don't have per se anymore giving contributions for free, meaning that you outsource or you give to, is an entity giving to a beneficiary part of the resources to implement the project. So either for free in Horizon 2020 or against payment now in Horizon Europe. The main difference is like now in Horizon Europe for in-kind contributions for payment, you need to comply with the specific eligibility conditions per budget category, which I will explain a bit later. Then you have subcontractors who do action tasks, a part of the action, which is important for the implementation, but that cannot be completely outsourced from the beneficiaries, which is the main difference with purchase costs, which don't actually do action tasks, only provide support to the implementation of those tasks. And then you have associated partners, which work in the action but don't have the capacity to declare any cost. So in the AGA, in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, which is a document that we have to a bit explain or in a further details the interpretation of the articles on the grant agreement, you have this page 13 that we can also find very useful to distinguish between the different type of participants and what are the rights and obligations and the specific conditions that they have per article. And it is very important that you take into account not only at during the design of the proposal, but also during the grant agreement that the roles of each participant are key during the inter-project implementation because they have very specific particularities and is somehow, unless there is some exceptions, very much it's very difficult to actually having two roles in the same project. So it's very important that you select which type of participation suits you better in accordance with your own internal circumstances that suits the general rules for participation. Then for type of cost, here I'm going to start to talk about the financial obligations that are not included in lump sum, but only in Horizon Europe, and it's very important, I mean, because they have a certain level of complexity. We are going to start with the different type of cost that the grant agreement has. The most important one, due to the high amount of budget allocated to this category, is personnel cost. That is divided into 4 subcategories, which are normal or regular employees, natural persons under a direct contract. I will explain this a bit further. Then seconded person and SME owners and natural person beneficiaries. You have, as I was mentioning, subcontracting costs. So you subcontract part of your activities in a very limited manner to another entity to help you out throughout the implementation of your action task. Purchase costs, who are divided among travel and subsistence cost, equipment, and other works and services. And other cost categories that don't apply in every case, apply only under specific circumstances that need to be actually already set up as a specific eligibility conditions in your call and topic description, which is financial support to third parties or internal invoices. And across all of them, you have indirect cost, which is a flat rate that we apply of 25% of all your eligible cost that we calculate automatically in your grant agreement. So it's very important to retain that the thing in common among all these budget categories is like you have Article 6.1, is a very important article in the grant agreement, which taps the general eligibility conditions for all the actual costs. Meaning that it doesn't matter which type of cost do you have, all the costs need to comply with these bullet points that are here and that also downstream in the article. One of the most important one is that the cost needs to be linked to the action and the cost needs to be real and not estimated, and also being identifiable and verifiable, recorded into your accounting practices. I know perhaps this information is a bit contradictory with what we have said in lump sum, but is part of the financial obligations. Then each budget category, on top of this general eligibility condition, have a specific eligibility conditions to be claimed and for you to be reimbursed. So for purchase costs, as a general rule, the most important part is that basically you need to comply with best value for money, or if appropriate, lowest price, and avoidance of conflict of interest when you are actually designing or signing this purchase cost. meaning that even for public bodies, you need to comply with your internal procedures on procurement, and this will be checked throughout the project implementation. As I was saying, this cost is divided between 3 subcategories, which is travel and subsistence. That usually the main condition is that is foreseen or budgeted and also awarded in accordance to your internal practices. Equipment, which I will have a dedicated slide a bit later, on that, which the main rule is depreciation cost. And as a novelty now in Horizon Europe, you have the capacity, if specified in the call topic conditions, to actually claim the full cost of the equipment. And then other goods or works and services, which can be, for example, consumables and supplies. And what I was mentioning about the equipment cost, so we have 2 scenarios. The general rule, which is like you have depreciation cost to claim those equipment costs. So here you have 2 scenarios. Most of the cases, either you only use the equipment for that action, so you just calculate the depreciation cost in accordance to the description that is provided in the model grant agreement and in the annotated model grant agreement. Or either you use this equipment for several projects, in which case we are going to ask you to actually calculate a portion of this equipment that is used for the project at stake. And the exception that I was mentioning is that you can claim the full amount of the equipment only on cases on which the call conditions are foreseen. So for personnel cost, we have 3 different categories, and as I was mentioning when I was discussing about participants, it's very important that you choose the right model of participation in the grant agreement to comply with these specific rules. So you have the most common one, which is employees or equivalent, so meaning that you have a normal regular employment contract or an equivalent appointing act for the public bodies or civil servants. And you have specific conditions there, so meaning that you need to be the employees with fixed salaries, the employees whose remuneration increases when working in the projects. Well, I'm not going to enter into the project-based remuneration because it's a bit specific. Then persons under direct contract and seconded person against payment is the second category that you may have under personnel cost. And meaning that for persons under direct contract is cost for natural persons that are working directly under contract other than an employment contract. The most common example here would be an in-house consultant, or meaning that you are working for the entity into the similar conditions as an employee without being an employee. And then you have cost for seconded person by a third party against payment, which, as an example, is like you are working for an entity and you sign a contract, or you are, how to say this and you are like sent to another entity to work into the project for your specific circumstances or expertise, while still being employee or employed by the previous entity. Then you have SME owners and natural persons and beneficiaries. In this case, is the most important part is like your entity needs to qualify under the regulation as an SME and be declared as such to the granting authority and recognized as such. And the most important part here for not being categorized under personnel cost, under employees, sorry, is that you don't have a regular salary within the SME, but you are having your salary through revenues of your SME. So the most complicated part of the MGA here is the calculation of actual cost for personnel cost. I would like to focus first that in Horizon Europe, we have for the first time a corporate formula, meaning that what we attempted, or it was attempted to be accomplished when this was created, is a kind of a small simplification across all the programs or funding programs that we have in the Commission. So everyone working in not only in Horizon Europe, but Life Projects or Digital Europe program will have the same calculation methodology for personnel cost. So what does it entitle? That or how to calculate it better. I mean, I will start first here, meaning that it's based on the equivalence work in the action, and we have two options to calculate this part. As a recommendation, we have a monthly declaration, which is a Commission template that you can find in the Fundings and Tenders portal. And here, the beneficiary reports the days of the equivalence work on the action on a monthly basis. And this declaration that is created in the Commission template needs to be signed by both the employee and the supervisor. The advantage that we find into this, the use of this Commission template is going to simplify the calculation methodology that you have. And even if when you have an internal system, it will allow you to better comply with the conditions of the complicated formula that has been designed. And the second option for this is another reliable time recording system in place that you may have internally in accordance with your internal accounting practices. And this is where most of the time the error rate from the auditors that we'll explain a bit later are found because of error or mistakes in the calculations of the formula. So into the practicalities, how do we calculate that? It's important that we understand that the formula is divided into a numerator and a denominator. So here we enter into the numerator, which is basically the actual personnel cost during the months within the reporting period. And it includes all the eligible personnel costs that are recorded into your statutory accounts, including the fixed salary, social security contributions, taxes, and fixed or variable components, and other payments linked to the remuneration that needs to be justified. What it does not include is remuneration that has not been an actual cost, arbitrary bonuses of payments of dividends. And what do we do with that? We divide it by the denominator, which in this case is the maximum declarable days equivalence, which is a pro rata base of 250. And 215 days is the figure established directly in the model grant agreement, as I was mentioning before, calculated for the corporate reasons to align with all the programs. Basically, in a more detailed manner, with the maximum declarable equivalent days, it's very important to take into account that is based into principles, which is the double capping. It's called double capping. First of all, we have the horizontal ceiling, meaning that it's particularly important for people working on several actions across EU, and that what we understand as a principle is the total number of the declarable day equivalents for one individual may never exceed these 215 working days per year to avoid risk of double funding. And then we have the reporting period ceiling, which is the limits of the equivalents that may be declared within a specific reporting period. So what do we do with those 215 days? We translate that into the formula that is in the slide. Basically, that we have these 215 days that will need to be divided by 12, which is meaning the 12 months per year that you have to work on a project. And then we multiply by the number of months within the reporting period that you will have. Per person employed in the project, meaning and then we multiply this by the working time factor, which is, for instance, if you work full time, we will multiply for 1, and you work like 75%, you will multiply this 0.75. So after all this complicated calculation, we also had another attempt of simplification in Horizon Europe, which is the personal unit cost calculation. which is a shortcut that we try to make for you, which is not lump sum in between lump sum and actual cost. And it's essential to know that this is an option that is made to help the beneficiary and is made on a voluntary basis, meaning that you need to request that your costs could be claimed within this PUC. And it will be a methodology applied by default in all your grant agreements if you request so. It means that it's going to be a daily rate that will be fixed ex ante before you access the grant agreement for a beneficiary, and it will avoid you to perform the calculation of personnel costs during your projects. Then I would like to focus on financial support to third parties, which is another budget category that is very specific and needs to be foreseen in the call topic conditions. So what is financial support to third parties? We also call it cascade funding. It means that we give to the beneficiaries an amount of money that needs to be cascaded down to third recipients, with the aim for us in the Commission to reach, for instance, potential targets or entities that will never reach otherwise with a project, and with the main purpose of benefiting these final recipients. Meaning that you need to design in your proposal stage why you will provide this financial support in according to the aims of the call description, and how you're going to provide this cascade funding to final recipients. So how does it work? Again, you have a general eligibility conditions that need to be met, and then you have a specific eligibility conditions in Article 6.2.d1, meaning that you have specific conditions that you need to cascade down to the final recipients, and that you need to comply with when you are applying this cascade funding, like for instance describing which will be your eligibility criteria for selecting these final recipients for the money that you're going to cascade down, what type of funding is going to be made, what is the work or what are the deliverables that these final recipients need to produce for you. And the maximum grant amount that needs to be awarded per final recipient. One of the most important parts here is like when you are creating this open call to actually cascade down money from the Commission. The important principle is that the selection process must be objective, transparent, and non-discriminatory, so mostly in compliance with the awarding procedure that we do in the Commission. And it's very important as a recommendation that if you have financial support to third parties, you need to invest sufficient effort into designing the scheme at the proposal stage, because the conditions are already lying in the general annexes and aligned with the model grant agreement. A complicated slide, very specific, is like how and when FSTP can be considered state aid. This is a technical slide that we included because basically it's one of the questions that we're receiving the most from the national contact points lately. The most important thing to retain, I'm sorry to say that, there's not a general response, it's a case-by-case scenario, and it would depend on the specific circumstances of the case, including the nature of the support, the beneficiaries, and the applicable standard state aid rules. The most important thing to retain here is like when we have financial support to third parties, the Commission is not giving money or funding a project in a direct manner like we do with the beneficiaries, but the beneficiaries provide this cascade funding under their own responsibility. So, meaning that our best practice here will be to contact your state aid authorities or the the competent authorities in DG Comp. In this slide, we also put an hyperlink to help you throughout a guidance document for communication from the Commission on the framework of state aid and the research activities. But if we have any dedicated question, I can try to address it a bit later because it's very technical. Another obligation that you have in the grant agreement is the reporting. The main distinction here, you have two types of reporting. First will be the continuous reporting module, meaning that is the contact that you have with the executive agencies in a direct manner throughout the entire project implementation, and can be covered by deliverables, milestones, outputs, or other outcomes during the project implementation. And it allows the granting authority to monitor the project and also take any mitigation measures or advice that to help you implement the project and that it reaches what we all want, which is a success on your project. And then you have the periodic reporting, which is set up also in your data sheet. So you have a specific predefined intervals established in the grant agreement. And unlike the continuous reporting, here you are going to be needed to submit a technical and a financial reporting. One covering how you have been implementing your project in accordance with the description of the action, and that the budget that you have is implemented in accordance with all the eligibility rules that I was mentioning before. And if your maximum grant amount per beneficiary is above 430,000 euros, you will be obliged to submit a CFS for the EU contribution. I'm going to go to a lighter part, I think, now, which is very important, which are the non-financial obligations. I'm going to finish with this. It's what we were mentioning before. After all these financial obligations that it's always a burden for you to comply with, the most important part here is the non-financial obligations, because it means that it focuses more on the research and the work that you do on a daily basis. And among them, the most common one, which is like all those obligations are in common with the lump sum grants, is the proper implementation of the action. I have been mentioning this throughout the entire presentation, so I'm not going to enter more into that, but you have other financial obligations that are described in Annex, non-financial obligations, sorry, described in Annex 5, among which the most important ones could be, like, for instance, you have security, which is for cases on which, right now we have sanctions against Russian entities. So, for instance, it could be cases on which your call topic description have a security screening that needs to be performed because of the type of participants that you have. And you will be guided with the granting authority through which will be the checks that will need to be done during the gap stage and then the project during the reporting period to comply with these obligations. You have ethics and research integrity, which is very important for some types of project that you may have. Gender balance, that is also going to be evaluated during your proposal stage. IPR protection, exploitation, and dissemination of results. Right to object, open access, and public emergency. I think the most common ones here will be like IPR protection and open access to science, which is an obligation that you need to ensure to provide access to the scientific publications and the research data. So this will lead me to the end of the presentation. It will be like guidance documents on Horizon Europe. As I was mentioning, the most important one for us is the annotated model grant agreement, which is going to provide you more details on how to interpret it and implement this grant agreement, the articles on the grant agreement. And also we have what we were mentioning before, of course, always the help of the national contact points, which is a main point of entrance on helping us compliance with the rules, and we are also in contact with them through the rest. And also the research inquiry service that you can find in the Funding and Tenders portal, in which you can contact us directly with any specific question that you may have besides the contact that you have in a daily basis with the executive agency, meaning your project officer, which is always a best practice to keep. And with that, I would like to thank you for all this attention in a bit boring and long presentation. Thank you.
J'avais une question sur l'éligibilité des dépenses. Dans la mesure où on ne vous les déclare pas en fin de projet et où vous disiez qu'il n'y avait pas d'audit financier, je voulais savoir du coup comment le contrôle allait s'effectuer. Si vous posez des règles, c'est bien pour qu'on puisse les suivre. Oui. Je posais la question sur l'éligibilité des dépenses. Dans la mesure où on ne vous les déclare pas et où on n'aurait apparemment pas d'audit financière, je veux dire, du coup, comment le contrôle va s'effectuer dessus?
Si je comprends bien la question, vous dites que vous ne savez pas déclarer les coûts réels et quel contrôle va être fait sur les coûts qui ne sont pas déclarés? Parce que je n'ai pas compris, désolé.
Si je puis me permettre, je pense que en fait, vous faites référence à ce qu'on disait tout à l'heure sur les lump sums, n'est-ce pas? Et là, en fait, la présentation de Martha portait sur les coûts réels.
Oui, okay. Ici, oui, la différence avec les lump sums, c'est qu'il va avoir un contrôle financier. Non, maintenant, pour Horizon Europe, le principal type de projet, c'est sur de coûts réels. Lump sum, ça devient de plus en plus commun et ça va peut-être devenir le plus factible, devenir le plus commun dans les prochains framework programmes. Mais oui, maintenant, on a des contrôles financiers, on a le contrôle financier qui se fait durant le reporting period. On a aussi des audits financiers et on a aussi des contrôles de l'OLAF, de l'officine antifraude, le bureau antifraude de l'Union européenne. Alors, ouais, là, il faut bien maintenir votre document. The accounting system that you have and the internal practices, and yes, your project officer will be in contact with you during the implementation. We will evaluate that these costs are claimed in accordance with the articles that I was saying, and it will have a financial impact. In case of non-compliance, it could lead to, for instance, rejection of costs or even reduction of the maximum grant amount. So it's the main difference between lump sum and actual cost grants. I don't know if...
Oui, bonjour, Marie Weiss, Alpla Group. Merci pour vos présentations très intéressantes. J'ai une question sur le... Je suis là. J'ai une question sur le Gender Equality Plan. Jusqu'à présent, il me semble que c'est plus ou moins obligatoire pour les non-for-profit organizations. Est-ce que ça va devenir obligatoire pour les for-profit? Quelles sont les évolutions sur le Gender Equality Plan pour les prochaines années? Merci.
Je ne sais pas, pour être honnête. Je n'ai pas les mandats de parler du FP10. Je sais que tout est sur la table, mais maintenant, je ne pense pas qu'il y a une discussion sur le non-financial obligations. Rien qui va changer. La discussion est plutôt pour le contrôle des non-financial obligations, un peu plus, parce que pour l'instant, ce qu'on a vu, c'est avec les audits qu'on a fait sur le JEP, la plupart des entreprises ne savaient pas comment accomplir avec tous les requirements that we have for the JEP, mainly, for instance, that you need to have an equality plan, a gender equality plan that is published and endorsed by the entity. And the concept of endorsement is the most complicated one that we have on the table. Because we want to simplify a bit more for you, so it could be like signed by your management. Because the most important thing for us that we realize after these audits is like we want entities to be able to have a proposed plan that can be maintained, and it's not only said so in the proposal stage and never maintained through the implementation. So also there is policy constraints there because we have different priorities across member states on this. Some of them want to keep a more strict line and some others a more flexible one. So it's on the table into the negotiations. But I don't think it's going to be changing for the entities that need to be... it's more on the design of the JEP than actually in the concept of...
I'll ask the question in English as just to mirror your presentation. Thank you. I've got two questions. I'll try and be brief. The first question relates to the use of personal unit costs. You mentioned in your slides that it was applied to all actual cost projects, we've been actually been told to apply it also to lump sum projects. Could you just clarify if that's the case or not? And then I had a second question.
I mean, if you want to.
My understanding is that if you have established personal unit costs, they should apply also, they must, I should say, apply also. Je ne sais pas pourquoi je suis parti en anglais. Ah oui, parce que vous êtes parti en anglais.
On peut switcher, il n'y a pas de problème.
Donc, si vous avez des personal unit costs, ils s'appliquent aussi au lump sum. C'est-à-dire que quand vous définissez votre budget, ben, vous devez suivre les pratiques des personal unit costs qui ont été validées si vous avez des personal unit costs qui sont validés. Je ne suis pas sûr que ce soit le cas d'entités en France, parce qu'il y a très peu d'entités qui ont des personal unit costs qui ont été validées. Je crois qu'il y en a peut-être 5 en tout en Europe. Et je ne suis pas sûr qu'il y ait une entité française.
En tout cas, nous, on en fait partie.
Ah,
voilà.
Quelle est votre entité?
INRAE Transfer.
Ok, d'accord.
Voilà.
Ben, en tout cas, donc, si vous avez des personal unit costs qui sont validés, vous devez les utiliser dans la définition du budget des lump sum aussi. Hein.
Même si la définition n'est pas la même, parce que le personal unit cost, c'est pour toute l'organisation, et dans le budget lump sum, c'est le coût moyen par un type de personnel sur les catégories données. Donc, ce n'est pas la même base. Donc, c'est pour ça que ce n'était pas très clair. Mais...
Ok, à vérifier, mais en principe, il s'applique. Hein.
Ok. Et ma deuxième question, je vais continuer en français du coup, c'est par rapport aux règles du jeu, parce que j'ai l'impression qu'une règle que vous ne l'avez pas explicitée, mais qui s'applique à nous et pas que nous, il s'agit plutôt, je fais référence à l'article 7, mais aussi 11 et peut-être 6.1, pardon, c'est par rapport aux tâches de gestion de projet vis-à-vis de la coordination. Apparemment, il y a une règle qui fait que la gestion de projet est assimilée à la coordination et donc à l'article 7 qui définit 3 tâches qui ne peuvent pas être déléguées. Est-ce que vous pouvez clarifier ça? Parce que c'est pas écrit noir sur blanc dans tous les documents cités que la gestion de projet est la même chose que la coordination, telle que la coordination est définie dans l'article.
Yes, I know to which case you're referring to.
Okay.
Because we replied to that, to you, I mean to your entity. Yes, I think it's a particular case because if you want, we can discuss this in a parallel manner later because it's a specific case between the entity. But yeah.
I think it concerns others too. But
yes,
I'm fine to discuss
it concerns others too. I mean, it's an issue that is happening in Italy, for instance, or France. It's a setup that is common there. In Germany, I think is similar. But for now, as the rules are, we can discuss later in a bit because I don't want to enter into your specific file and the details that. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jérémy, vous m'entendez bien? Oui, Jérémy Sroussi de Weston. Ma question porte également sur les lump sum, donc la première présentation que nous avons eue, et sur le calcul des coûts de personnel, notamment des taux. Je voulais savoir s'il y avait de la souplesse dans le calcul de ces taux par rapport aux coûts réels, notamment par exemple sur la règle des 215 jours. Est-ce qu'on doit appliquer cette règle également pour le calcul des taux dans les lump sum, ou est-ce qu'on peut utiliser une règle interne? Est-ce que de manière plus générale, on peut utiliser les taux pratiqués en interne dans l'entreprise par catégorie de personnel?
Alors, à ma connaissance, oui. Vous pouvez utiliser tout ce que... Alors, il y a le cas particulier où vous avez des coûts de personnel unitaire qui ont été définis et validés, hein, qu'on a discuté avant, mais si ce n'est pas le cas, vous pouvez utiliser les coûts qui sont vos coûts standards par catégorie de personnel, et vous devez évidemment toujours justifier la raison pour laquelle vous utilisez telle ou telle assumption sur les coûts. Hein. Mais je dirais a priori oui.
Hein. Merci beaucoup pour vos présentations respectives. J'avais 2 questions. La première, c'est en termes de pratique. On a de plus en plus le cas de PO qui nous demandent, lors des reportings, hein, de transmettre les timesheets, les feuilles de temps. On sait que c'est inscrit dans le grant que le bénéficiaire doit envoyer tout document requested by the commission, mais on nous demande à présent, on a un cas où on nous demande à présent des bulletins de paye. Hein. Un PO qui nous demande des bulletins de salaire. Donc ça nous embête un peu parce que ce sont des pièces qu'on transmet en cas d'audit de la Commission de la Cour des comptes européenne. Donc ma question c'est, est-ce que c'est une pratique qui va s'étendre parmi les project officers ou est-ce que c'est que le CNRS qui n'a pas de chance? Et la deuxième question, c'est par rapport au personnel, par rapport à la méthodologie de calcul des coûts de personnel sur Horizon Europe, sur les projets qui seront opérés, les peu de projets qui seront opérés en cours réel de la prochaine programmation, est-ce qu'on maintiendrait cette même méthodologie? Parce que c'est compliqué à chaque fois de changer de méthodologie de calcul des coûts de personnel. Et là, on est passé d'un coût journalier après un coût horaire sous H20 qui succédait à un coût journalier sous FP7, etc. etc. Donc ça demande quand même une ingénierie pour s'adapter. Merci beaucoup.
Alors pour la première question, normalement non, c'est pas un standard pratique qui doit se faire par les project officers. Mais nous, internellement, on a des contrôles ex ante qui peuvent se faire. Alors, il y a une liste de risk assessment que le project officer et le financial officer a. Et en cas de doute, aussi dans l'IM, dans le modèle Grant Agreement, est prévu que la commission peut faire des checks pendant et après l'implémentation du projet. Alors, je ne sais pas quel est votre cas particulier, mais peut-être le project officer ou le financial officer a une doute particulière. Et dans le cadre de cette doute, il a demandé le supporting documents pour vérifier que la décision qu'il va prendre elle est proportionnelle, qu'il ne va pas rejeter de coûts, par exemple, que par quelque chose qu'il suspecte ou une erreur. Alors, ça ne va pas se standardiser. Et pour la deuxième question, non, pour le moment, il n'y a pas une discussion sur le changement de calcul de personnel sur les Nest FP10.
Agora, du coup, on aurait deux petites questions par rapport au coût actuel. On a beaucoup notamment questionné cette année le PCN juridique à propos de ça parce qu'on a eu beaucoup de mal à calculer nos coûts de personnel. Et notamment dans les questions qu'on avait, c'était que nous, comme on est en convention collective Syntec, on est un organisme qui dépend d'une convention spécifique, on a un coût qui s'appelle la prime de vacances et on ne sait pas du coup si elle doit être intégrée dans le calcul du frais de personnel ou pas. Et dans la liste des coûts spécifiques par pays, on n'a pas trouvé en fait cette prime mentionnée.
I will reply to this one in English. Sorry. No, so the thing is like for personnel cost, long sick leaves and holidays are not included into the calculation of personnel cost. Only parental leave is included on that because what is considered is like already on the ceiling on the multiplier of the 250 days. These holidays is already included in the corporate formula, so not to calculate twice. That's how it works. In the numerator, it doesn't count. I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but then it's already counted in the formula that we have in 250 days.
But actually, the amount that we give to our collaborator to
you cannot include it in the formula. I mean,
okay.
You can when you calculate it, you cannot include it because it's already because when we have this this horizontal ceiling of 215 days. The maximum declarable days per year, we are already counting the holidays into these 215 days. That's why it will be like counted twice if you include it in your formula. So no, usually they are not eligible as a simplified question.
Et la deuxième question qu'on avait aussi, c'est qu'on a plusieurs coûts, notamment de frais de personnel, qui sont reliés lorsqu'on finit un projet. Les coûts sont éligibles jusqu'à la date de fin du projet, mais pour autant, on a beaucoup de coûts, notamment liés au reporting et à la rédaction des différents rapports post-projet. Comment on inclut ça, du coup, dans les coûts qu'on a eus pour le projet, en fin de compte?
Je pense, je ne suis pas... il faut que je regarde, mais je pense, je pense qu'ils sont inclus, qu'il y a une exception dans les AGA qui c'est en jaune, dans lesquels les costs pour the reporting or final report are included dans le final reporting period. Et normalement, ça doit être rapporté pour le final report. Et aussi, si par exemple, il y a des coûts qui sont faits, mais pas... they are not incurred yet. I mean, we have also a provision mechanism. This I will need to double check, which is a COPA, complementary payment after the final report to cover costs that should have been incurred in the final report, but because they weren't incurred or still in the accounting system, they couldn't be claimed in the financial report.
Ce sera peut-être la dernière question. Comme ça, on ira déjeuner en temps et on pourra continuer les échanges informels à ce moment-là.
Bonjour, Gilles Mouton, CEA. Vous avez parlé de l'application de l'encadrement des aides d'État pour le Financial Support to Third Party. Est-ce que vous pouvez donner des exemples où on doit se poser la question de cet encadrement des aides d'État?
Pour l'instant, j'ai pas, parce que c'est pas notre compétence, c'est DigiComp. On est en train maintenant de négocier le Gérer, qui est une partie de la régulation. Alors, c'est ce que je peux dire, c'est qu'on est en train de voir comment couvrir aussi que tu sais, le second level cascade funding between the beneficiaries and the final recipients are also covered by this Gérer regulation, which is the exception to report on a state aid cost to the Commission during the minimum will be included. So I don't have a practical example, but I can tell you that we're working in close cooperation right now to improve the Gérer regulation for FSTP in the next multi-annual financial framework. I'm sorry I cannot provide you an example, but it also needs to be taken into account if it is a commercial activity or not. It is really an evaluation on each specific case.